Hi, Grandpa. I have some questions for you today.
Okay, Jordan.
My first question is, what are your thoughts on any major historical events in your lifetime? For example, historical events that might include World War II, Pearl Harbor, the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Apollo moon landing, JFK's assassination, the Watergate scandal, Operation Desert Storm, and September 11th attacks.
Okay, well, first of all, you took me a little too far back when you said World War II. I don't know if I can remember that far back. I'm your grandpa, but I don't think I'm that old. So, but the Vietnam War, Vietnam conflict, I was in the military during that time.
You were?
I did not go to Vietnam, but I was in the military. I was in the Air Force for 4 years during the Vietnam conflict. The other you asked about was like World War II and the Korean conflict. I don't know a lot. Well, from a historical standpoint, yeah, I've read and I know that, but as far as my being old enough to be involved and engaged, no. Now, the Kennedy assassination happened in 1963. I was still in high school. I think I was about 9th grade. And that was a very, very traumatic time for a lot of people, especially people in my generation, because we had never had a president to be assassinated before in our lifetime.
Oh, it was a president?
There had been president that had been assassinated. Yeah, did you say the Kennedy assassination?
Yeah, it's JFK.
JFK,
Yeah.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He was the president of the United States, and he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Some people liked him and some didn't, so he was assassinated. And in those days, presidents didn't have what they call the Beast. Now, the Beast is the car that the president rides in. They rode in convertibles, and they were open, and everybody could see them, and they could walk up to them. And somebody, as he was driving down in Dallas, Texas, somebody was in a building they called the Book Depository, and they shot and killed him.
Okay. Did the person who shot the president, did he like go to jail?
Eventually, they had a hard time finding who it was, but they eventually decided to determine that it was Lee Harvey Oswald. And then a guy by the name of Jack Ruby, as they were moving Oswald from one jail to the other one, Jack Ruby shot him and killed him. So it was just a mess.
Okay.
So did he go to jail? No, he got killed before he could go to jail.
Oh.
Yeah. So he was shot, and Jack Ruby shot him. So he say Oswald shot President Kennedy, and then Jack Ruby shot him, and so it was just a whole lot of stuff going on at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the Operation Desert Storm?
Desert Storm. That was a lot later. Was it? Did you have something else before that?
There was the Watergate scandal.
Yeah, the Watergate scandal. That was another one that was before the Desert Storm. The Watergate scandal was in the early 70s. That was when Richard Nixon was president. And you know where the Watergate building is downtown by the Kennedy Center? Those apartments over there, they're called the Watergate.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, the Watergate scandal was that some of the people from President Nixon, from his White House, that they broke into the Watergate, into the Democratic Party, and stole some of their records or their papers, and then that became a real mess. Not so much the break-in, but all the cover-up that they tried to do to cover it up and say it didn't happen or whatever. So that was a big scandal. It ended up with President Nixon having to resign as president. of the United States, he had to leave his job because the pressure, the political pressure became so strong until he had to resign. And he resigned his presidency in shame and went back to California.
So, is that how it got its name, the Watergate scandal?
The Watergate scandal got its name because the building that the Democratic, I think it was the Democratic headquarters, their records were in the Watergate building. It's an apartment building and an office building. So it was in the Watergate building. So the scandal got its name from Watergate because it happened in that building.
So how about the September 11th attacks?
The September 11th attacks, that was in 2001, I think. And that was another very, very trying time for this country because no one had ever attacked this country like that before. And that was when the Twin Towers in New York were brought down by aircraft.
Did you know anyone in the building?
I did not. I did not know anyone in the building. But there were, I forget how many people, was it two? I forget the number of people that were killed. I can forget the number right now. I don't want to give you a bad number. But no, I didn't know anybody in the building that were killed, but there were a lot of people that were killed. And eventually those buildings had to come down, and they have now built another building in New York.
Okay.
Well, before you go to your next question, though, Dad, where were you when Dr. Martin Luther King was shot? You remember where you were?
Yes, I was in college. I was in 1968, April 1968. I was in college in Grambling. I was a sophomore in college when he was assassinated. Yeah. So we had three people that were assassinated in a relatively close period of time. We had JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Then we had his brother that was assassinated, who was the Attorney General, and then we had Martin Luther King that was assassinated. So those three assassinations happened in my lifetime when I was much younger.
Okay.
A couple of them, I was in high school and other in college.
Were there any marches on the Grambling State University
Oh,
or anything
yeah.
like that when that,
Oh,
when
yeah.
that happened?
There were marches and demonstrations all over the country. I remember that the students at Grambling took over the administration building, and we had, they took over the administration building, and they were marching, and in the village downtown. But see, we didn't have a lot of, Grambling is a very, very small town. I'm going to take you guys there one so you can see it. So there was not a lot of like downtown, like in D.C. or places like that. So only the things that they did was like on the campus, and that's basically what happened. But yes, there were demonstrations in all of the colleges and universities, especially the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities across the United States. They had demonstrations and that kind of thing to let their voice be heard on the things that they were disagreeing with and that they didn't like and that type of thing.
Did you participate in any of the?
We did.
You did?
Mm-hmm. We did at Grambling and also back at my hometown in Shreveport. My nephew Oliver and I, we would march, and because that was in the 60s, we couldn't go into certain restaurants to eat and all of that kind of thing. So we would march downtown, and the NAACP was very, very active at that time, and we had a very, very good leader in the NAACP at that time. His name was B.J. Mason, and he led a lot of demonstrations, and we participated in a lot of demonstrations in Shreveport. I remember one on, I think it may have been on, I went home that weekend, it may have been on a Saturday. And we were going to march down Texas Street, the street that we drove down when we went to Shreveport in this past year. And I remember that Saturday morning, we were marching and we were like, you say, it's awfully quiet here. All the stores there was nobody on the street except for us marching. So we decided we were just going to march on down the streets, and we were going and going. And all of a sudden, when we got near the courthouse and all of the street police and stuff just started coming out of those stores with their billy club. They just start beating from them. So we almost was like ambushed. But we survived that one, and we got out without any. We did, Oliver and I did, without any physical harm. But that was a big one. That was probably the biggest one that I had ever been in. But we were trying to do what we thought we needed to do to make things better for you guys.
Okay.
All right. What's your next one?
That's about it.
That's it? All right. That's good.